Hello, everyone. My name is Pranai Reddy, co-founder and CEO of MorphLabs. Today, I want to take you on a deep dive about how MorphLabs got started in the first place. I grew up in South Texas, in Corpus Christi specifically. It was considered a smallish town, small city, cusp of whatever you want to think, but resources were relatively limited relative to bigger cities. In Corpus Christi, I went to a Jewish preschool, a Catholic elementary, middle, and high school, and grew up in an Indian household. That kind of taught me and shaped me in terms of how to put things into perspective and how to approach different problems with different lenses. When I was growing up, I used to play competitive tennis, competed in piano competitions, and kind of had my hands in a lot of different hobbies. But I never really felt a true spark come from inside of me until visiting family in rural India for the first time. This spark is not just something that is high level, surface level, where you find something interesting. It was something that's so deeply ingrained that it almost feels like a calling and that there's no going back. There in that village, I kind of saw how many amputees there were relative to the general population. There were a lot of amputees, mainly because a lot of the individuals out there are farmers and labor workers of that sort or operate heavy machinery. But more importantly, a lot of those individuals were prone to different sorts of infections, whether that's a cut, whether that's a wound, or whatever it may be. And by being prone to these infections, they are prone to also having sepsis. And sepsis just means as an infection in any sort of part of your body, it tends to spread. And therefore, in communities like that, the really only way to give medical care to that sort of case is by amputation. Before it spreads to the rest of the body, try and cut the limb before it spreads. And so a lot of those individuals were amputees. And obviously, it's not a very wealthy small town. They're all farmers. And so what I saw was a lot of tents set up on the side of the road. Tents that were, a lot of these people lived out of them and had families out of them. But also I saw these amputees that had a significant accident and had all reason to have their morals torn apart, still continue to provide for their family, whether that's taking a tree branch, cutting it up a certain way and putting it on as a stump, or that was taking different sorts of random tools, equipment around them that they can find just so that they can continue functioning. And that was super inspiring to me, obviously, to see, like, coming from a relatively privileged background, how people in the worst of conditions relatively were still able to find a way to fulfill their responsibilities and duties that they have, as whether that's a father, mother, son, doesn't matter. They were still there to provide for their family. And inspired by this, and obviously with the types of access that exist in the United States, I really felt the compulsion to do something about it. After going home and not being able to, one, sleep, two, wrap my mind around why conditions like this can exist when someone or something can be done about it. And so I decided, what can I do about it? I'm thinking so much about it. And so there's definitely something that perhaps I can help with somehow, some way. Thinking through that, I realized there was a way I could do it, but it wasn't from the engineering perspective necessarily. It was from being able to start a coalition in which I got a lot of people to care about the problem and to give a shit. About this community in rural India that was often overlooked, yet so inspiring to anybody who would ever have the chance to witness that. So what I did was I started selling different things, whether that was random rubber band bracelets that I made, and my sister was selling random knit items that she made. As soon as we got a little bit of money, we started thinking about how we can actually make this bigger. Prosthetics, regardless of how low cost you get, tend to be relatively expensive. And so we were sourcing different ways so we can find the best possible solution for those types of patients. And so after doing a lot of digging and searching, we came across this organization in India called Freedom Trust. Freedom Trust is a nonprofit that builds custom low-cost prosthetics for amputees in rural India. And so it was kind of perfect. The way they operate is being able to get enough funding in order to service those communities. So because we had the community in mind and because we found Freedom Trust, now the only goal was being able to get enough money to service these amputees. And so what we did on a bigger scale was, for example, host a golf tournament look up in, like, find the phone book directory for everyone in our city and look a lot of those individuals up on Google and see if anything promising came up about if they were successful, if they were wealthy. Give them a phone call, see if they would be willing to donate. Say that people in your community are caring something about this and would love to get more involved. And brought them to events, showed them a golf tournament. And we eventually, over the course of a year and a half, 2 years, was able to raise enough money to get over 150 low-cost prosthetic limbs to that community. The highlight of it all was the fact that I had the opportunity to go back there and set up a whole, I guess, event with a venue to hand deliver these devices to that community. And to get that opportunity to do that as a 16-year-old is life-changing, mind-altering, whatever word you want to throw at it. That's how it felt. And so that's kind of like what instilled in me the idea that, or the concept of using technology and medical devices to improve human independence, one side of things, but on the other side, as a 16-year-old who dreamed, enhancing human capabilities altogether. I loved Iron Man, I loved Spider-Man, I loved all the superheroes, and all those superhuman capabilities were not impossible to achieve. Genetically, maybe not, but through augmentation, through different technology and applications and appliances, people can always achieve more. And so that kind of like shaped my idea of how I was thinking and what I wanted to pursue when I went into university. I went to Rice because it was right next to the Texas Medical Center, and so I'd get a lot of access to how a lot of these devices that were already helping a ton of people's lives, and understand how the commercial workflow looks, the engineering build-up workflow looks, the clinical perspective, and the whole 9 yards. I started out as bioengineering major, but soon found myself a lot more deeply interested in how these devices, once taken from a certain problem and solution standpoint, were really proliferated and were taken from something that was just brought up in a lab bench to something that actually services a better half of the world, if not the entire human race. And so I wanted to get on that front line. I wanted to do something about it. And so I pivoted my studies into business and biochemistry to give a lot of time outside of the classroom to pursue how to explore these opportunities. I then fell interested into this concept of venture capital, which is essentially how startup raises finances, if you don't know what it is. And because I wanted to understand, okay, from a founder's perspective, got a little bit of understanding. From a clinician's perspective, seeing both my mom do, she's a doctor, nephrologist, and see her do her rounds and all of that, but also from my experience with the Texas Medical Center. And so the one thing I was missing was, how does an investor think? How does an investor put these pieces of the puzzle together? How do they look at this technology, the landscape of shifting technology? And that's pretty much the concept of what venture capital is. So I wanted to get that experience as well, so I can think like them while acting like a founder and doing things like a founder. And so I started Rice's first student-led venture fund, where we raised $2 million from alumni, donors, whoever we can get. Same sort of process, actually, as the Walk Again nonprofit I started in high school, except in college. And this was more so in order to give students hands-on venture capital experience by sourcing and investing in startups that they came across that were vetted and super high quality for our investment committee to review. But our fund was split up into 4 sectors. It was healthcare, energy, consumer, and enterprise. Healthcare and energy are the biggest in Houston. And so that's what allowed us to have really a leg up in terms of people who doubted us and our ability to actually have proper deal flow. But I, through that experience, got a lot closer into how investor thinks in the healthcare community. I mean, we were sourcing deals from the Texas Medical Center, from different hospital chains in around Texas, and just Houston's being on the forefront of Houston's promise in medical devices. And so this allowed us to source deals for other medtech investors, but be able to invest in our own. And through that experience, through starting it as well as getting the hands-on experience, it pretty much gave me the ultimate courage that by the time I graduated, I felt entirely confident to start my own thing, to think about how I can apply and get people around me to coalition around a certain problem and to tackle it with complementary skill sets. And so on the pursuit of this ambition, this dream that I wanted to start a company and be able to do something, and while still staying close into prosthetics from high school, I was exploring many different options. But one day I listed up a profile on Y Combinator's co-founder matching. After meeting like 40 or 50 people and all assessing on various different things on whether that's idea they came up with or idea I came up with and how they would fit in, I came across this one dude named Nick David. And Nick, he came to me on this phone call. He was a same year student at Florida State University, a mechanical engineering student. And he was building this dexterous robotic hand. And he was mainly building this from the lens of like humanoid robots are going to be a big thing. Like the hand is the most complex biological asset. And how do we replicate? How do we get closer to it? How do we essentially mimic the human capabilities of the hand, the diversity in terms of the capabilities of what it can do? And while thinking on this, while pondering on it, and while having our first discussion last 4 hours long, I started thinking deeply about the community I served back in India and the prosthetics and the amputees that, and how that whole workflow worked. And kind of realized that prosthetic hands today are quite far behind, and started talking to Nick about the potential avenue about how we could help amputees and discover different ways in which nobody has done things before for that community in a very first principles ground up approach. Thinking through about how we would use that hand and what that hand's purpose is, and talking to a lot more amputees and prosthetists and clinicians and everybody in the ecosystem, we came to realize that it wasn't the prosthetic hand that was actually the issue. It wasn't the end device that was actually being moved. It was actually the person's ability to control that device. Most of the prosthetic hand companies actually find more business in selling to robot companies than they do to selling to humans who are missing a hand. That doesn't come from the effectiveness of how those hands operate. It comes from the effectiveness of that user's ability to control that hand. And so after kind of really uncovering that this was the core issue, and uncovering why or how the existing market or competitors or people were building things for amputees, we realized the technology hasn't really changed in the past 40 years. As soon as we've uncovered that control system was the problem behind why amputees are not happy with their existing prosthetics, we realized there's definitely something here, and we definitely need to push it to its limit to test and see if this is a real viability. Our first immediate thing was our skill sets were mine were business and clinical, and Nick was in mechanical engineering and hardware. And we really need to tie it all together with someone who can really handle biosignals, because we wanted to read the brain and the body signal, but more importantly, be able to handle the computational neuroscience and the other side of things that really involve the breadth of the technicality and control systems. And that's when we met Soham, also through Y Combinator's co-founder matching. As soon as we pitched him this vision, this idea of our logic behind how we approach this problem and this potential solution, he was immediately brought on board. But the reason why he really clicked with us was because of his outlook on life. And obviously that becomes more apparent over time. But in the very beginning, there was something about him, something about his eagerness, something about his curiosity to learn, something about how he presented himself. And obviously, everything happens for a reason. And for many reasons that are countless, but fundamentally bottom line to the vibe was just right, we started taking a crack at the problem, started talking to a bunch of people, started working on different prototypes. And soon enough, over the course of each of us three being remote for our final year of college, while still starting this company and being on Zoom calls every single day for 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 hours, we realized like our commitment was unwavering. We had so many other options to do on any given day, yet we still chose to come back and log back in on Zoom and still update each other on different progress. And so by the time our graduation rolled around, we had went to many different pitch competitions together, leveraged each of our different universities for all sorts of non-dilutive funding. We had enough to go all in that summer and really test whether we would make this a reality. They moved into Houston right after graduation in the summer program that Rice gave us non-dilutive funding for and office space, and we started grinding away. We started approaching this fundamental idea of bypassing the peripheral nervous system, the concept of using your remaining muscles, your residual muscles to flex and control a prosthetic to your brainwaves directly, straight from your central nervous system. Reason being, it varies significantly for an upper limb amputee on where their limb loss or limb differentiation occurs, whether that's their wrist, elbow, below elbow, above elbow, at the shoulder. And depending on where it is, they only have so much residual muscle that isn't atrophied or produces a good enough signal for muscle signals. And so if we allow anybody with upper limb loss to be able to use a multi-articulating hand or an advanced bionic hand, then we would solve a major gap in the fundamental satisfaction of each user in not having to suffer through pain of flexing their residual limb and just be able to move a hand straight by their thought. That's the concept on which MorphLabs got started, and the concept in which we are operating now. MorphLabs started and is still continuing on the mission of being able to build the most intuitive control system for prosthetics. But we are a neurotech company. We are trying to understand the depths of the brain non-invasively to first, yes, allow amputees to control prosthetic hands, but also to allow humans to achieve a lot more straight from their brain, to type without typing, to text without texting, to speak without having to actually move their mouth. For fighter pilots to be able to have a faster reaction time while operating a spacecraft, for manufacturers to be able to move an assembly line quicker or operate many different things at once because you have access to their brainwaves. This is a concept in which we are at Morph are heading, and the fundamental platform starts with the fact of how do we restore independence for those who've lost it, and how do we enhance human capabilities for able-bodied people, for people like you and I. And I think the biggest mystery behind solving that problem is the brain, and the most effective way in solving for it is by doing it non-invasively, so the accessibility for anybody wanting to use the device is just as easy as taking something on and off. After going from being remote entirely to them, my co-founders Nick and Soham, moving into Houston with me, to getting enough traction to be able to start getting our first investors and getting the opportunity to move to New York City, where we were closer with a bigger amputee population group and a growing neurotech scene. We've gotten our own place up here in East Harlem. We live together, we work together, all in the same spot, and we've gone from our very first prototype to many iterations of it, to many iterations of many different types of prototypes, to eventually having something where now we get to work with amputees on a week-to-week, maybe even daily basis, and are starting up getting our accuracy of being able to actually have the hand move from somebody's brainwaves and have different sorts of prototypes and moving closer to getting an FDA submission. Soon we're having clinical studies go underway with different hospitals, whether that's in Houston or New York. We're looking at ways where we can start integrating on amputees. Right now, our biggest focus is around data collection, just capturing as much relevant EEG data as possible so that we can decode the intents as accurately as possible. We are continuing data collection. We also hope to reignite that community in India to also help out in this data collection effort, and also hopefully help out their upper limb amputees as well. There's a lot to look forward to. I think the most important thing right now is the fact that we are starting to add more team members to the team, which is exciting, as well as the fact that things are starting to work on the hardware side and the software side. And so that means the fundamental assumptions we started to make about our company and our approach are starting to work out, which is a very exciting situation to be in. For me, it's most important that we take every small win and use it as momentum, obviously, but more importantly, we savor our losses and learn from the lessons of why we could have done something faster, why we did something wrong, where we could have improved, or where we did really well and why we did really well. And I think it's just a constant iteration feedback loop. Like, we ourselves as humans are not AI models, but we're just models. Our brain just works on a certain way to be able to constantly adapt, learn, do things. And I think us as a cohesive company are doing the exact same thing in a very specific direction. And so I'm excited to, as these next days, weeks, months, years, we are on the path to non-invasive telekinesis. Whoever's watching this video, thank you for supporting. I'm excited to bring you along on this journey that we have at MorphLabs. For my personal journey, for Nick, Soham, and our wonderful co-founding partnership of marriage that you can so deemly call, I don't know. Yeah, no, excited for you to follow along. Excited for you to see our traction, our progress, the work we actually do with amputees, our ins and outs, how our technology works, the future, the vision, the story, the plot, the vibes, the art, whatever that's going to come in between. I'm excited for you to tune along, and thanks.